It started with a sentence that shattered every certainty Elias Monroe had built his fortune on. Please don't choose me. I break people. Those 6 words didn't just stop him, they hollowed him out. The man who'd stared down hostile boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar mergers in 3 languages found himself frozen in a narrow hallway in Queens, staring at a 6-year-old black girl in a wheelchair with galaxy pattern tape wrapped around the rims. He had come here looking for a purpose, maybe redemption. He hadn't expected to find a child who'd already given up on hope. If you think you know where the story is going, you don't. By the end, this child will change his life in a way money never could. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And hit subscribe so you never miss stories that stay with you long after they end. That morning, Elias had woken in his Tribeca loft, the kind of space that felt more like a museum than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline. His assistant had already laid out his schedule. 2 investor calls, a keynote at Columbia, dinner with a senator. Every minute accounted for. Every dollar maximized, but none of it touched the hollow space in his chest. A year ago, his younger sister Naomi died in a car crash while he was in Singapore finalizing a merger. She'd called him 3 times that week. He'd texted back, "I'll be home soon. We'll catch up." There was no soon. There was no catch up. Only flowers at a funeral and a promise he'd never kept. The business magazines called him a visionary. The truth was simpler and crueler. He'd traded his sister's last days for stock options and standing ovations. So that morning, he did something no one expected. He canceled everything. He pulled on a worn Howard University hoodie, Naomi's, the one she'd left in his car, and took the subway to Queens like he used to when he was just a kid from Atlanta with big dreams and small pockets. St. Catherine's Family and Adoption Center sat wedged between a bodega and a laundromat. No marble, no chandeliers. Just scuffed linoleum and crayon drawings taped to pale yellow walls. The receptionist blinked twice. "Mr. Monroe?" "Just Elias," he said, his voice quieter than it had been in years. "I'm here to meet Amara Lewis." The caseworker, a woman named Claire Daniels with kind eyes and tired shoulders, led him down a hallway that smelled faintly of tempera paint and cafeteria mac and cheese. She walked slowly, as if giving him time to turn back. "Amara Special," Claire said carefully. "Brilliant artist. Asks questions most adults can't answer. But she's been returned 3 times. She paused at a doorway. She doesn't believe in staying anymore." Elias nodded, but something sharp twisted in his gut. He'd prepared for paperwork, for questions about his income and his schedule. He hadn't prepared for a child who'd already built walls higher than his own. When he saw her, everything else fell away. Amara sat in the art room, near a window streaked with afternoon light. Her hair was twisted into 2 puffs tied with bright yellow ribbons. Her wheelchair had those galaxy tape rims, silver stars on deep purple. In her lap sat a sketchbook covered in drawings of turtles. She didn't look at him when he entered. She just kept coloring, her small hand moving in careful, deliberate strokes. "Hi, Amara," Elias said, his voice catching slightly. "I'm Elias." She glanced up, not at his face, but at his sneakers. Then his hands. Then, finally, his eyes. Studying him the way you'd study a puzzle you've solved too many times. "You're the tech guy," she said flatly. "Claire said you make apps that help people talk to each other." "I try," Elias said, crouching down so they were at eye level. "I build tools so people can connect." Amara tilted her head. People connect all the time. Then they disconnect. That's the part no one talks about. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was factual, the way you describe weather or gravity. Elias opened his mouth to respond. Something hopeful, something adult and reassuring. But nothing came. The silence stretched between them, wide and honest. Amara went back to coloring. "Turtles are slow," she said quietly. "But they don't leave. They just carry everything with them." "That's smart," Elias said. "It's not smart," she corrected. "It's just true." They sat together for a while. She showed him her drawings. One of a turtle with a cracked shell, another of a house with a ramp instead of stairs. He told her about the first computer he ever built, how it caught fire in his dorm room and set off the sprinklers. She almost smiled at that. Then, without warning, she set down her crayon and looked directly at him. "Please don't choose me," she said softly but firmly. "I break people." Elias felt his lungs forget how to work. The first family said I was too much work. Medical appointments every week. They said. The second one had a baby and said they couldn't handle both of us. The third one, her voice wavered. She said she loved me, but then she got tired. She said she didn't have the energy anymore. Amara's small hands gripped the armrest of her wheelchair. "I don't want you to get tired of me. Not like them." Elias felt something crack open inside him. Something he'd kept locked since Naomi's funeral. His throat burned. His vision blurred. He'd cried before at gravesides in empty apartments, but never like this. Never because a child spoke a truth, so clean it stripped him down to bone. "I'm not tired," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not yet," Amara said, her eyes shining but dry. "But you will be." Claire stepped closer, her hand brushing Elias's shoulder. "She doesn't usually talk this much," she said gently. This is a lot for her to say. Elias nodded, unable to speak. His chest felt like it might collapse. The meeting was supposed to last 20 minutes. It stretched to 90. When he finally stood, Amar was drawing again, a stick-figure man standing beside a stick-figure girl in a wheelchair. A lopsided sun hung above them both. She tore the page out carefully and held it toward him without meeting his eyes. "You can keep this," she said. "So, when you forget what I look like, you'll remember why you left." Elias took the drawing like it was made of glass. "I'm coming back," he said. Amara didn't answer. She just wheeled herself toward the window where the light pooled gold on the floor. "Everyone comes back once," she murmured. "It's the staying part that nobody does." Elias made it to the stairwell before his knees buckled. He made it to the stairwell before his knees buckled. But to understand why those words hit him like they did, why a man who built empires could be undone by a child's truth, you have to go back to Atlanta, back to a promise he couldn't keep, back to the sister he lost while chasing success. This is the story of how their worlds collided. But first, let's meet the man before the meeting, and the girl before the grief. But before we rewind, there are questions hanging in the air, questions that need asking, questions that, once answered, will make you see everything differently. Why does a 6-year-old believe she breaks people? What kind of world teaches a child that love has an expiration date, that every hand extended will eventually pull away? 3 families, 3 returns, 3 rejections that carved themselves into her bones until she learned to reject first, protect first, close the door before anyone else could slam it shut. What happened in those homes? What did she see? What did she hear whispered when they thought she was asleep? And why has no one fought for her? Then there's Elias. Why would a billionaire, a man whose calendar is managed in 6-minute increments, whose signature moves markets, whose face appears on magazine covers under headlines like The Algorithm King, walk into an adoption center in Queens unannounced? No press, no publicist, no carefully staged photo op for the business journals. Just a man in a hoodie, taking the subway, stepping into a world where his money means nothing and his name changes nothing. What was he running from? Or maybe the better question, what was he running toward? Because men like Elias Monroe don't just show up. They strategize. They plan. They execute with precision. But that morning, he walked into St. Catherine's like a man who'd lost his map, who'd realized, maybe for the first time, that all his carefully built roads led nowhere. So what does he want? Forgiveness? Redemption? A second chance to be the person he failed to be when it mattered most? Or is it simpler than that and more devastating? Maybe he just wants to feel something again. To stop moving through life like a ghost in his own skin. To remember what it felt like to stay instead of leave. To be present instead of always one deal away, one flight away, one I'll be home soon away. Maybe he's looking for proof that he's still capable of love. That guilt hasn't calcified around his heart. That he can keep a promise to someone, even if he couldn't keep it to the person who mattered most. And Amara? What truth is she hiding behind that impossible strength? Because that's what it is, isn't it? Strength. Not bitterness. Not anger. She's not lashing out or testing boundaries with rage. She's doing something far more heartbreaking. She's protecting him. Protecting this stranger from the disappointment of her. Warning him off before he invests too much. Before he gets tired. Before she becomes a burden he regrets. She's 6 years old, and she's already learned to make herself smaller so other people can stay comfortable. What does a child have to endure to learn that? What words were spoken? What silences were louder? She draws turtles, slow, steady, carrying their homes on their backs. Is that what she wishes she could be? Self-contained? Not needing anyone because needing people only leads to loss? Or does she draw them because turtles can't be returned? They don't depend on someone else's promise to stay. They just exist, quietly, patiently, moving at their own pace in a world that demands speed. Look at the two of them now, standing at opposite ends of a bridge neither knows how to cross. On one side, a man who built a kingdom but lost the only person who called him by his first name without expecting anything in return. On the other, a girl who learned that love is conditional, that forever has fine print, and that the safest thing to do is never hope at all. Manhattan stretches above them, glittering, indifferent, relentless. The skyline Elias helped build, the towers that bear his tech in their walls, the infrastructure humming with his algorithms. He shaped this city's future, but he couldn't stop time long enough to answer his sister's call. And somewhere in Queens, behind the modest brick walls of St. Catherine's, Amara wheels herself back to her room. She shares with two other girls who still believe in wishes, who still draw families with everyone smiling, who haven't yet learned that people leave. She knows better now. She's known better for a while. But here's the thing no one tells you about brokenness. It recognizes itself. Elias saw something in Amara's eyes that afternoon. Not pity, not defiance, but knowing. She looked at him the way you look at someone when you see past their performance. She clocked the grief he carries like an invisible weight. She understood, without him saying a word, that he wasn't there to be a hero. He was there because he didn't know where else to go. And she'd spoken her truth not to hurt him, but to spare him, to let him off the hook before he even got tangled in it. Please don't choose me. I break people. It was an act of mercy from a child who'd been shown no mercy. That's what made him buckle in the stairwell. Not sadness, not pity, recognition. So what happens next? Can a man haunted by the sister he lost learn to stay for a child the world keeps leaving? Can a girl who's been returned 3 times believe that the 4th time might be different? And what happens when two people who convince themselves they're broken try to build something whole? This is a story about a billionaire swooping in to save a poor disabled child. That's the story people expect. The one that fits neatly into headlines and Instagram captions and TED Talks about giving back. This is something messier, something truer. This is about two people learning that love isn't transaction. It's not about being saved or being the savior. It's about showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It's about staying when every instinct tells you to protect yourself and run. It's about a man who spent his entire adult life building exits, realizing he has to build a door instead and keep it open. It's about a girl who spent her short life bracing for goodbye, learning that maybe, just maybe, not everyone is counting down the days until they leave. The questions remain, hovering like smoke. Why does Amara believe she breaks people? Why did Elias show up? What does staying really cost? And can either of them survive the trying? New York moves on, the way it always does. The subway rattles beneath the streets. The buildings scrape the clouds. The city churns with ambition and noise, and the relentless forward momentum of 8 million people all trying to matter. But in a stairwell in Queens, a man sits on cold concrete, clutching a child's drawing, and wonders if he has anything left to give. And in an art room 3 floors above, a girl in a wheelchair stares out the window at the darkening sky and wonders if anyone ever actually stays. The answers are coming, but they'll cost both of them everything they've used to protect themselves. Because before we can understand how love rebuilds, we have to see how it breaks. Before we can witness the staying, we have to see what made them run. He came looking for purpose, but he found a child who no longer believed in promises. And somehow, in the space between his guilt and her grief. Something impossible is about to begin. Elias Monroe didn't start in penthouses. He started in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in southwest Atlanta, where the AC only worked in one room, and his mother worked double shifts at Grady Hospital just to keep the lights on. His father left when Elias was 7, walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. No note, no goodbye, just gone. But he had Naomi. Naomi was 3 years younger, all elbows and laughter and questions that never stopped. She'd sit on the edge of his bed while he coded on a laptop held together with duct tape, asking him what he was building. Something that'll get us out of here, he'd say. Where are we going? She'd ask. Somewhere better. And he meant it. Every scholarship he won, every competition he placed in, every all-nighter he pulled, it was all for them. For his mom, who deserved to stop working herself to bone. For Naomi, who deserved a future bigger than the 4 blocks she'd grown up on. By 25, Elias had built his first app, a communication platform that connected underserved communities to resources they couldn't otherwise access. It went viral, then it went profitable, then it went stratospheric. By 30, he was a billionaire. The media loved him. The self-made black tech genius from Atlanta who'd cracked the algorithm for human connection. He gave TED Talks. He sat on panels. He smiled for cameras and told inspirational stories about pulling himself up by his bootstraps. But he left out the most important part. He'd promised Naomi he wouldn't forget her when he made it. He forgot anyway. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But slowly, the way you forget a language you don't speak anymore. The calls got shorter. The visits got rarer. I'll be home next month became I'll be home next quarter, became I'll see you soon. She understood. At least she said she did. Go build your empire, big brother, she'd text. I'm proud of you. The last time they spoke, she called while he was in Singapore closing a merger worth $900 million. He let it go to voicemail. She called twice more that week. He texted back. Slammed right now. I'll call you when I land. Promise. 3 days later, she was driving to a job interview when a truck ran a red light on Moreland Avenue. She died before the ambulance arrived. Elias got the call while he was shaking hands with investors, champagne and crystal flutes. Everyone congratulated him on the deal of the century. He flew home, but he was too late. He'd been too late for months. At the funeral, he stood in front of her casket and made another promise, this one to a sister who couldn't hear him anymore. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll be there next time. But there was no next time. There was only the hollow echo of wealth without meaning, success without soul, and the sickening realization that he traded his sister's last days for stock options and standing ovations. For a year, he moved through his life like a ghost. He closed deals. He gave speeches. He smiled for the camera. But inside, he was drowning. Until one morning, he woke up and decided he had to do something. Not for publicity. Not for tax write-offs. Not for the optics. For Naomi. For the promise he couldn't keep. He didn't know what he was looking for when he walked into St. Catherine's that day. But maybe, somewhere deep in his bones, he knew he needed to learn how to stay. Amara Lewis was born in Baltimore on a rainy March morning to a mother who sang Aretha Franklin while she cooked and a father who promised he'd always protect them. She was born with spina bifida. Her spine hadn't fully closed before birth. The doctors said she needs surgeries, physical therapy, maybe a wheelchair eventually. Her mother, Shanice, didn't flinch. She learned every medical term, attended every appointment, fought every insurance company that tried to deny coverage. You're not broken, baby, Shanice would whisper, holding Amara close. You're just built different. And different is beautiful. Amara believed her. For 5 years, she had everything a child needed. A mother who read her stories, a father who carried her on his shoulders, a tiny bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Then her mother got sick. It started with headaches, then dizziness, then the diagnosis, an aneurysm, inoperable, unpredictable. Shanice fought it for 6 months. She fought it with the same ferocity she fought for Amara's medical care. But some battles can't be won with love alone. She died on a Wednesday, holding Amara's hand, whispering, "You're so strong, baby, stronger than you know." Amara was 5. Her father stayed for 3 weeks after the funeral. Then one morning, Amara woke up and he was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty house and a neighbor who called social services. Amara learned the truth that day that would shape the rest of her life. People leave, even the ones who promise they won't. The first foster family took her in with good intentions. They were an older white couple in Towson with a big house and a golden retriever. They said they wanted to help. But Amara had doctor's appointments twice a week. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, specialists in the city. The husband started missing work. The wife started looking tired. After 4 months, they sat Amara down in the living room and tried to explain. "It's not you, sweetheart. It's just, we weren't prepared for how much care you'd need." They returned her like a library book. The second family was younger. A couple in their 30s trying to start a family of their own. They had a nursery painted yellow, stuffed animals everywhere, so much hope it hurt to look at. Amara tried to be good. She tried to be quiet. She didn't ask for much. She drew pictures and said thank you and never complained, even when her back ached from sitting too long. But after 6 months, the wife got pregnant. And suddenly, there wasn't enough room, not enough time, not enough energy. "You're a wonderful girl," the wife said, crying. "But we can't give you what you need right now, not with the baby coming." Amara didn't cry when they drove her back to the group home. She just stared out the window and added another layer to the armor she was building. The third family was the worst because they did love her, or at least the mother did. A single black woman named Mrs. Lorraine who worked as a nurse and had 2 grown kids of her own. She treated Amara like a daughter. She braided her hair on Sunday mornings. She called her my little artist. She said, "You're staying, baby. This is your home now." Amara almost believed her. But Mrs. Lorraine got older. The night shifts got harder. Amara's needs, the wheelchair, the medical equipment, the constant vigilance, became overwhelming. One evening, 8 months in, Mrs. Lorraine sat on the edge of Amara's bed and said the words that broke something final inside her. "I love you so much, baby, but I'm tired. I don't have enough left to give you what you deserve." That's when Amara learned the cruelest lesson of all. Love isn't enough. Not when people get tired. Not when life gets hard. Not when caring for someone costs more than they're willing to pay. So she built a rule, and she never broke it. Stop getting attached before they leave. Ask for nothing. Expect nothing. Protect yourself first. Because she didn't need someone to save her. She needed someone who wouldn't leave. And in 6 years of living, she'd learned that person didn't exist. 2 broken people, separated by geography and circumstance and entirely different kinds of loss. One who'd learned that success meant nothing if you lost the people who mattered. One who'd learned that matching to people only led to pain. One running from guilt. One running from hope. And when their paths finally crossed in that quiet art room in Queens, a billionaire on his knees, a child in a wheelchair with galaxies on the rims, the universe held its breath. Because sometimes, the people we're meant to meet aren't the ones who complete us, they're the ones who break us open just enough to let the light back in. The art room smelled like tempera paint and apple juice. Elias stood in the doorway, his heart hammering in a way it hadn't during board meetings or keynote speeches, or the time he'd pitched investors for $12 million with only a prototype and a dream. This was different. This was a 6-year-old girl who already knew how to see through people. Claire, the caseworker, touched his elbow gently. "Take your time," she whispered. "And don't take anything personally." She protecting herself. Elias nodded, his throat dry. Amara sat at a low table near the window, her wheelchair angled slightly away from the door. Her head was bent over a piece of construction paper, a purple crayon moving in slow, deliberate circles. The galaxy tape on her wheelchair rims caught the afternoon light, glinting like actual stars. She didn't look up when he entered. He took 3 steps into the room and stopped, suddenly aware that every move he made was being cataloged, measured, filed away as evidence. "Hi, Amara," he said softly. I'm Elias. She kept coloring. Claire said you like to draw. Still nothing. He glanced at Claire, who gave him an encouraging nod from the doorway. Elias moved closer, not too close, and crouched down so he wasn't towering over her. He could see her drawing now. A turtle in an elaborately patterned shell, standing under a sky full of stars. That's beautiful, he said. Amara set down her crayon and finally looked at him. Not at his face, at his shoes first, then his hands, then his eyes. The way you'd examine something you were thinking about buying but weren't sure would last. How long do you think you'll last? She asked. The question hit him like a fist to the sternum. What? He managed. A week? A month? Her voice was calm, almost clinical. Most people make about 6 weeks before they realize I'm too much work. Elias felt the floor tilt beneath him. He'd prepared for questions about his job, his home, his qualifications. He'd prepared to prove he was stable, responsible, capable. He hadn't prepared for a child to look at him like she already knew his expiration date. I'm not here for a week, he said, his voice catching. I'm here because you want a kid, she interrupted. Her eyes hadn't left his face. Or because you lost someone? The air left the room. Elias opened his mouth, closed it, felt something crack open in his chest. Something he kept sealed with work and distance, an illusion of control. How did she know? I swallowed hard. I lost my sister. Amara nodded slowly, like he'd just confirmed a hypothesis. That's what I thought. You have the same look Mrs. Lorraine had, like you're trying to fix something that already happened. Elias felt his vision blur. He blinked hard, his jaw tightening. For a moment, a brief, shameful moment, he wanted to leave, wanted to walk out of this room and back to his Tribeca loft where no one asked him questions that mattered, where he could hide behind spreadsheets and strategy meetings and the armor of wealth. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe it was Naomi's voice in his head. Stay. For once in her life, just stay. Maybe it was the way Amara was watching him. Not with cruelty, but with a kind of weary understanding that no 6-year-old should possess. Or maybe it was because he'd spent a year running from the truth, and here was a child brave enough to speak it out loud. He took a breath. You're right, he said quietly. I can't fix what happened, but I'm not here to fix you either. I'm here because, he paused, searching for words that felt true, because I made a lot of promises I didn't keep, and I want to be someone who keeps them. Amara studied him for a long moment. Then she wheeled herself back slightly, just a few inches, but enough to create distance. People always say that, she said. In the beginning, everyone says they'll stay. Elias lowered himself onto one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. What if... Don't. She held up a small hand, stopping him. Don't kneel. People do that when they're trying to make promises. And promises don't mean anything. He froze, one knee on the cold linoleum, feeling the weight of every person who'd knelt before her with good intentions and hollow follow-through. Slowly, carefully, he rose back to his feet. Okay, he said. No promises. Good. Amara picked up her crayon again, but she wasn't drawing, just holding it. You seem nice. That's the problem. The nice ones hurt worse. Why? Because you believe them. Her voice was so small, so matter-of-fact. The first family seemed nice. They had a big house and a dog, and they said I could stay forever. But then they got tired of driving me to doctors. The second family was nice, too. They painted a room for me. But then they had a real baby, and I was just extra. Elias felt something sharp lodge itself between his ribs. And the third one, he asked gently. Amara's grip on the crayon tightened. She loved me. I know she did. But love isn't enough when you're tired all the time, when someone needs too much. She finally met his eyes, and what he saw there nearly destroyed him. Not anger, not bitterness, but a bone-deep exhaustion that belonged on someone 50 years older. I don't want you to get tired of me, she whispered, like everyone else did. The words hung in the air between them, fragile, devastating, true. Elias couldn't speak. His throat had closed around a grief too large to swallow. He'd cried at Naomi's funeral, alone in his penthouse, into his pillow at 3 a.m. when the guilt became unbearable. But this was different. This was a child who'd been loved and left so many times she'd learned to preemptively reject love altogether, who'd weaponized her own worthlessness as a shield, who convinced herself she was the problem. I'm already tired, she continued, her voice barely audible. Tired of trying. Tired of hoping. Tired of being the kid nobody keeps. Amara? His voice cracked on her name. You should pick someone else, she said, turning back to her drawing. Someone easier. Someone who doesn't need so much. She drew another star in the sky above the turtle. Quick, violent strokes of purple crayon that tore slightly through the paper. Claire stepped forward from the doorway, her hand moving toward Elias's shoulder, ready to give him an out, ready to end the meeting before it caused more damage. But Elias didn't move. He stood there, watching the small girl rebuild her walls in real time, brick by brick, and he understood something he'd never fully grasped before. Leaving is easy. It's staying that costs everything. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Amara didn't look up. That's what they all said. I know. So why should I believe you? You shouldn't, Elias admitted. Not yet. Not until I prove it. She glanced at him, surprised. How? By showing up, he said, again and again, until you're sick of seeing me. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not hope, but maybe the faintest crack in her armor. A question she didn't want to ask but couldn't suppress. What if? She wheeled herself back to the table and picked up a fresh piece of paper. Without looking at him, she started drawing 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, one standing, one in a chair with stars on the wheels. You can stay for today, she said, but don't get your hopes up. Elias exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Deal. They sat together in that sun-streaked art room for another hour. They didn't talk much. She drew and he watched. Sometimes she'd show him a picture, and he'd tell her what he saw. She almost smiled twice. When it was time to leave, she handed him the drawing, the 2 stick figures under a crooked sun. So you remember, she said. Remember what? That I warned you. Trust doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in fragments, in moments, so small you might miss them if you're not paying attention. In the space between a breath held and a breath released. In the slow, cautious unfurling of a heart that's been closed so long it's forgotten how to open. For Elias and Amara, trust came in pieces, sometimes broken ones. Elias came back the next day, and the day after that, on his 4th visit, Claire suggested they take a walk around the building. Get some fresh air, she said. The center had a small courtyard out back, nothing fancy, just some benches and a patch of grass that had seen better days. Want to check out? Elias asked. Amara shrugged. Okay. He moved behind her wheelchair, gripped the handles, and started pushing. They made it through the doorway fine, down the hall without incident. But when they reached the ramp leading to the courtyard, Elias misjudged the angle. He pushed too hard, too fast. The wheelchair lurched forward, picking up speed. Amara's hands flew to the armrests, her knuckles going white. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, the kind that come right before a scream. Whoa, sorry. Elias pulled back hard, stopping the chair abruptly, but the damage was done. Amara was shaking, not crying. She wouldn't let herself cry, but trembling so violently her teeth chattered. I'm sorry, Elias said, coming around to face her. I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking. She wouldn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on some point in the distance, her breathing ragged. Amara, I'm so sorry. It's fine, she whispered, but her voice was thin as paper. It's not fine. I scared you. She finally met his eyes, and what he saw there gutted him. Fear, yes, but also resignation. The look of someone who'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, and now felt vindicated. See? You can't even push me safely. How are you going to handle the hard stuff? Can we go back inside? She asked quietly. Of course. He pushed her back, slowly this time, so slowly it was almost painful, and when they reached her room, she wheeled herself to the window without saying goodbye. Elias stood in the doorway, his heart in his throat. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. She didn't respond. He came back the next day, like he said he would. And the next, and the next. By the end of the second week, Amara started to believe, just barely, just enough, that maybe he wasn't counting down the days until he left. One afternoon, she showed him a new drawing. A turtle, but this one was different. Its legs were cracked, held together with what looked like tiny bandages. What happened to him? Elias asked gently. He got hurt. Amara said, but turtles don't leave when they're hurt. They just pull into their shell and wait until it's safe to come out again. Elias looked at the drawing, really looked at it, the care she'd taken with each crack, each makeshift repair, the way the turtle's eyes were open, alert, still watching the world even while wounded. Turtles stay, she added softly. Yeah, Elias said, his voice rough. They do. She looked up at him. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. She studied his face for a long moment, then carefully tore the drawing from her sketchbook and handed it to him. You can keep this one too, she said, in case you forget. Amara had to wear a back brace sometimes, a rigid plastic contraption that supported her spine and made her look smaller than she already was. She hated it, hated how it dug into her ribs, how it made her sweat, how it announced to the world that she needed help just to sit upright. One Thursday afternoon, Claire was running late, and Amara needed to put the brace on before physical therapy. I can help, Elias offered. Amara hesitated. You don't know how. Then teach me. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing trust against vulnerability. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but you have to do it exactly right or it hurts. Show me. She guided him through it. Where to position the padding, how to thread the straps, how tight to pull without cutting off her breathing. His hands were clumsy at first, fumbled with the Velcro, but he listened to every instruction. There, she said when he finished. That's good. Not too tight. No, it's perfect. Something shifted in the air between them. Something quiet but seismic. He'd touched her medical equipment without flinching. He'd asked questions without pity. He'd learned instead of calling someone else to do it. Thank you, she said. So quietly he almost missed it. Anytime, he replied. And he meant it. Amara didn't tell him this, but she watched him leave every day, from behind the door of the art room, or through the window of the common area, or sometimes in the hallway when she thought no one was looking. She watched him walk to the elevator, wait for the doors to open, step inside. She was testing him, checking to see if his shoulders slumped with relief the moment he thought she couldn't see. If he pulled out his phone immediately, already moving on to the next thing. If he looked back, he always looked back, every single time. He'd turn just before the elevator doors closed, his eyes scanning the hallway. And even though she always ducked out of sight, she wondered if he knew she was there one afternoon. Elias showed up with a brown paper bag from a Jamaican spot in Brooklyn. I brought you something, he said. Amara eyed the bag suspiciously. What is it? Plantain chips. I remembered you mentioned your mom used to make them. She went very still. How did you know that? You drew a picture last week. You labeled it Mama's Kitchen. There were plantains on the counter. Amara stared at him, something complicated flickering across her face. He'd been paying attention, not just to what she said, but to what she drew, to the small details she hid in the margins of her art. She took the bag slowly, opened it, pulled out a chip. The taste hit her like a memory. Salt and sweetness and her mother's laugh and Sunday afternoons before everything fell apart. She ate 3 more chips, her face carefully neutral. But Elias saw it, the tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth, the fight against a smile. They're okay, she said. Just okay? Maybe a little better than okay. He grinned. I'll take it. They were walking to the courtyard. Elias had gotten much better at pushing her wheelchair when a group of kids ran past, laughing and shrieking. One of them, a girl about 9 or 10 with her hair in 2 puffs tied with bright yellow ribbons, stopped to tie her shoe. Elias stopped walking. His breath caught audibly. Amara turned to look at him. His eyes were fixed on the girl, his face drained of color. Elias. He didn't respond. He was somewhere else entirely, seeing someone else entirely. Elias, she said again, louder. He blinked, coming back to himself. Sorry. His voice cracked. She looked like... He didn't finish, but he didn't have to. Amara reached back and touched his hand where it rested on her wheelchair handle. Your sister? She asked softly. He nodded, not trusting his voice. What was her name? Naomi. That's pretty. Amara kept her hand on his. I bet she had a good laugh. Like that girl. Yeah, Elias managed. Yeah, she did. They sat in silence for a moment. A man grieving, a child comforting, and in that stillness, something fundamental changed. She'd spent 6 weeks waiting for him to need too much from her, to expect her to be easy, to be grateful, to perform wellness she didn't feel. But here he was, hurting in front of her, not hiding it, not pretending, trusting her with his broken places. It's okay to miss her, Amara said. I know. He squeezed her hand gently. Thank you. For what? For being here. She squeezed back. By the 7th week, something had shifted between them. Not fixed, nothing was fixed, but softer, more honest. They were learning each other's languages, his grief and her armor, her fear and his guilt, the ways they both learned to survive by shutting down. And slowly, so slowly neither could name the exact moment, they were learning to open back up. If this story has your heart racing, comment, I'm still watching. Let's see who's truly following till the end. But just when she started letting him in, the past came knocking to... IT happened on a Tuesday. Elias had been visiting for 8 weeks straight. Every day, sometimes twice. He learned Amara's rhythms. How she got quiet when her back hurt. How she hummed under her breath when she was concentrating on a drawing. How she only made eye contact when she was testing whether you'd flinch. He thought they were building something. Not trust, not yet, but the foundation of it. The scaffolding. He was wrong about how fragile it still was. That morning, Claire met him in the lobby with a folder of drawings Amara had made over the weekend. She wanted you to have these, Claire said, handing them over. She was excited to show you. That's a good sign. Elias took the folder carefully, the way you hold something sacred. Thank you. Of course. I'll let her know you're here. Claire disappeared down the hallway, and Elias sat in one of the worn chairs near the window, opening the folder. Inside were 5 or 6 drawings. Turtles with galaxy shells, a house with ramp, a stick figure man, and a stick figure girl planting flowers. And then, folded beneath the last drawing, a piece of notebook paper. He pulled it out, assuming it was another sketch. It wasn't. It was a letter, written in Amara's careful, shaky handwriting. The letters uneven. Some words crossed out and rewritten, like she labored over every syllable. He almost stopped reading when he realized what it was. Almost. But his eyes had already found the first line. Dear Elias, I don't know if you'll read this. Maybe I'll give it to you. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep it under my pillow where nobody can find it. I've been thinking about what happens when you leave. Not if, when. Everyone leaves eventually. I know that now. The first family left because I was too hard. The second family left because they got something better. Mrs. Lorraine left because she got tired. So I know you'll leave too. Maybe not this week. Maybe not next month. But one day you'll wake up and realize I'm too much work, or too broken, or too sad, and you'll stop coming. And that's okay. I won't be mad. I won't cry this time. I'll just pretend you never came. That hurts less. I've gotten good at pretending. But I want you to know something before you go. I don't need someone to save me. I need someone who won't leave. And I don't think that person exists. But I wanted to believe it was you. Amara. Elias read it twice. Then a third time, because his vision had blurred, and he needed to be sure he'd understood correctly. His hands were shaking. The paper trembled between his fingers like something alive. Something that could shatter if he held it too tight or not tight enough. I'll just pretend you never came. That hurts less. He felt something crack open in his chest. Not the clean break of a bone, but the slow, jagged tearing of scar tissue that had been holding him together. She'd been preparing for him to leave since the day they met. Every smile she'd almost given him, every drawing she'd shared, Every time she let him help with her brace or push her wheelchair or sit beside her in comfortable silence, she'd been bracing for the inevitable. She'd been writing her own ending before he had a chance to write it with her. Elias stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum. He needed to see her, needed to tell her that he wasn't going anywhere, that she could stop preparing for abandonment because it wasn't coming. Not from him. Not ever. But before he could take a step, Claire reappeared, her face tight with something he couldn't read. Elias, can I talk to you for a minute? I need to see Amara. I know, but this is important. Something in her tone stopped him cold. What happened? Claire gestured toward her office, and Elias followed, his stomach sinking with every step. She closed the door behind them and sat heavily in her desk chair. We received a complaint this morning, she said quietly, from one of Amara's previous foster parents. What kind of complaint? They're claiming she has behavioral issues. Aggression, defiance, emotional instability. Claire's jaw tightened. It's not true. I've worked with Amara for 2 years. She's one of the most emotionally regulated children I've ever met. But the complaint was filed formally, which means the state has to investigate. Elias felt the air leave the room. What does that mean for the adoption? It means everything stops, Claire said, until the investigation is complete. It could take weeks, maybe longer. Who filed it? The second family, the ones who returned her when they got pregnant. Elias's hands curled into fists. Why would they do that? I don't know. Guilt, maybe, or they're trying to justify why they gave her up. Claire rubbed her temples. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this delays everything. And Amara, she trailed off. She can't know, Elias said immediately. If she finds out, she already knows. His heart stopped. What? She was in the hallway when I got the call. I didn't realize she was there until it was too late. Claire's voice cracked. She heard me on the phone with the state caseworker. What exactly did she hear? Enough. Claire looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed. She heard me say your name. She heard the words behavioral issues and delay and investigation. Elias felt the room tilt. She thinks I'm backing out. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. She just wheeled herself back to her room and closed the door. Elias didn't remember walking to her room. One moment he was in Claire's office, the letter still clutched in his hand, and the next he was standing outside Amara's door, his knuckles hovering over the wood. He knocked softly. No answer. Amara? It's me. Silence. Can I come in? Nothing. He tried the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly, giving her time to tell him to leave if she wanted. She was sitting by the window, her back to him, her wheelchair angled so she didn't have to see whoever entered. Amara? You should go, she said, her voice flat. I'm not going anywhere. You have to. They said there's an investigation. They said it's going to take a long time. Her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. It's okay. I understand. You don't understand. Elias moved closer, but she still wouldn't look at him. That complaint, it's not true. None of it is true, and it doesn't change anything. Yes, it does. Her voice was so small. It always changes things. People get tired of waiting. They find someone easier. Amara, look at me. She shook her head. Please. No. Her shoulders were shaking now. Because if I look at you, I'll believe you. And then when you leave, it'll hurt worse. Elias crouched down beside her wheelchair, the letter still in his hand. I read something today, he said quietly, something you wrote. She went completely still. I wasn't supposed to, he continued. A staff member gave it to me by accident, but I read it, and I need you to hear this, okay? Amar didn't respond, but she didn't tell him to leave either. You wrote that you don't need someone to save you. You need someone who won't leave. His voice cracked. And you're right. That's exactly what you need. That's what you deserve. But nobody... I'm not nobody, he said. And I'm not leaving. Not because of an investigation. Not because someone who doesn't even know you anymore filed complaint. Not because it's hard or complicated, or it takes longer than we thought. You say that now. I'll say it every day if I have to. Elias moved so he was in her line of sight, even though she was still staring at her lap. I'm not them, Amara. I'm not the people who left. And I know you don't believe that yet. I know you're waiting for me to prove you right. But I'm going to prove you wrong instead. Finally, she looked at him. Her eyes were dry, but barely. Her face was a careful mass of control that was fracturing at the edges. What if you can't? She whispered. Then I'll fail trying, he said. But I won't fail by walking away. The silence that followed was heavy, fragile, impossible to Mara's hands slowly unclenched from the armrests. They said it could take weeks. Then I'll be here for weeks. What if it takes months? Then I'll be here for months. What if... Her voice broke. What if they decide I'm too broken? What if they say you can't adopt me? Elias felt something inside him shatter and remake itself all at once. Then we'll figure out together, he said. But I'm not leaving you. Amara. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. She searched his face for a long time, looking for cracks, for exits, for the lie underneath the promise. She didn't find one. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay. She took a shaky breath. But if you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, then you can say I told you so, Elias said. But I won't. For the first time in 8 weeks, Amara let herself cry. Not the loud, wailing sobs of a child throwing a tantrum, but quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks like they'd been waiting years for permission. And Elias stayed. The hearing room was smaller than Elias expected. Not a grand courtroom with vaulted ceilings and dramatic lighting. Just a cramped administrative space in a municipal building in downtown Manhattan. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls were beige. A single window looked out onto a brick wall. But the stakes had never been higher. Elias sat at a table with his attorney, a woman named Patricia Chun who'd handled adoptions for 20 years and rarely lost. Across from them sat the state's attorney, a stern-faced man in his 50s who looked like he'd already made up his mind. And at the front of the room, behind a modest desk, sat Judge Lorraine Williams, a black woman in her early 60s with silver locks and eyes that missed nothing. Elias's palms were sweating. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without his heart rate spiking. He'd pitched venture capitalists with nothing but a prototype and a dream. He'd given keynote speeches to thousands. None of it had prepared him for this. Because this wasn't about money or markets or algorithms. This was about Amara. And if he failed here, he'd lose her forever. The state's attorney called the first witness. The state calls Mrs. Jennifer Hartwell. Elias's stomach turned. The woman who entered was in her late 30s, blonde, neatly dressed in a cardigan and slacks. She looked like someone who volunteered at church bake sales and hosted book clubs. She looked kind. She wasn't. Jennifer Hartwell was the second foster parent, the one who'd returned Amara when she got pregnant, the one who'd filed a complaint that started all of this. She took her seat, was sworn in, and folded her hands in her lap like she was about to deliver unfortunate but necessary news. Mrs. Hartwell, the state's attorney began, you fostered Amara Lewis for approximately 6 months. Is that correct? Yes. And can you describe your experience? Jennifer sighed, a practiced, sorrowful sound. We tried. We really did. But Amara was difficult. She refused to engage with our family. She wouldn't speak at meals. She'd lock herself in her room for hours. And when we tried to connect with her, she'd become defiant. Elias's jaw clenched. Can you give an example? The attorney asked. Well, we'd plan family activities, movie nights, trips to the park, and she'd refuse to participate. She'd say she didn't want to go, that we were wasting our time. It was like she was punishing us for trying to love her. Elias felt Patricia's hand on his arm, a silent warning. Stay calm. And then, Jennifer continued, her voice dropping, I became pregnant, and Amara's behavior got worse. She started saying things like, you won't want me anymore. She became withdrawn, almost hostile. We tried therapy, but nothing worked. Eventually, we realized we couldn't give her what she needed. not with a baby on the way. The state's attorney nodded sympathetically. So you returned her to the center. With a heavy heart. Yes. We thought it was best for everyone, especially Amara. And you filed a formal complaint regarding her behavioral issues? I did, because I was concerned. Jennifer looked directly at the judge. I don't want her to end up in another home that can't handle her. She needs specialized care, professional support, not just someone with good intentions. The implication hung in the air, not someone like Elias Monroe. Patricia stood. Mrs. Hartwell. Isn't it true that you never sought specialized care for Amara while she was in your home? Jennifer blinked. We did therapy. 2 sessions, Patricia interrupted, consulting her notes. You attended 2 therapy sessions in 6 months, and both were canceled by you, not Amara. We were busy. And isn't it also true that Amara's so-called withdrawal began immediately after you announced your pregnancy? Jennifer's face flushed. I don't see how that's relevant. Because a 6-year-old who'd already been abandoned once understood she was about to be abandoned again, Patricia said, her voice cutting. She wasn't being defiant. She was protecting herself. Objection, the state's attorney said. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Williams said. But her eyes lingered on Jennifer a moment longer than necessary. Next came Claire Daniels. She took the stand with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 2 decades advocating for children who couldn't advocate for themselves. Ms. Daniels, Patricia began, you've been Amara's caseworker for 2 years. Can you describe her behavior during that time? Amara is one of the most resilient children I've ever worked with, Claire said without hesitation. She's been through trauma that would break most adults. And yes, she's guarded. She has walls. But those walls aren't behavioral issues. They're survival mechanisms. Can you elaborate? Amara doesn't act out. She doesn't throw tantrums or break rules. She doesn't hurt other children or disrespect staff. What she does is protect herself. She expects abandonment because abandonment is all she's known. That's not a behavioral disorder. That's survivor strength. The state's attorney stood. Ms. Daniels, isn't it true that Amara has been returned by 3 separate families? Yes. And doesn't that suggest a pattern of incompatibility? Claire's eyes hardened. It suggests a pattern of families not being prepared for the realities of foster care. Amara requires medical appointments, adaptive equipment, and emotional support. None of those things make her unmanageable. They make her human. Then it was Elias's turn. He stood, his legs unsteady, and took the witness stand. Patricia guided him through the basics, his background, his financial stability, his reasons for pursuing adoption. Then she asked the question that mattered. Mr. Monroe, why Amara? Elias took a breath. Because I know what it's like to lose someone because you weren't there, he said quietly. My sister died while I was closing a business deal. She called me 3 times that week, and I didn't answer. I told myself I'd call her back, that I'd see her soon. But there was no soon. There was just gone. His voice cracked. I can't fix that. I can't bring her back. But when I met Amara, I saw someone who'd been left behind over and over again. And I realized that maybe, if I showed up for her the way I didn't show up for my sister, I could prove to myself that I'm still capable of keeping a promise. So this is about your guilt, the state's attorney interjected. Elias turned to him. It started that way. But it's not about that anymore. It's about her. About a little girl who believes she's too much, too broken, too hard to love. And I need her to know she's not. Even if it's difficult, the state's attorney pressed. Even if it requires sacrifices. Especially then. Judge Williams leaned forward. Mr. Monroe, what happens when the novelty wears off? When the late-night medical appointments pile up, when Amara tests you, and she will, to see if you'll leave like everyone else? Elias met her eyes. Then I'll prove her wrong, he said, again and again, for as long as it takes. The judge called for a brief recess. When they reconvened, she made an unexpected request. I'd like to speak with Amara. Elias's heart stopped. Claire wheeled Amara into the room a few minutes later. She looked impossibly small in that bureaucratic space, a child in a galaxy-taped wheelchair, her face carefully blank. She wouldn't look at Elias. Judge Williams smiled gently. Hi, Amara. I'm Judge Williams. Do you know why you're here? Amara nodded. I have one question for you, and I need you to be very honest with me. Okay. Another nod. Do you want Mr. Monroe to stay in your life? The room went silent. Amara's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. People always say they'll stay, she whispered finally. Then they don't. Elias felt something shatter inside him. He stood. Patricia tried to stop him, but he was already moving and crossed the room. He knelt beside her wheelchair, the way he had that first day, bringing himself to her eye level. Amara, he said softly. She still wouldn't look at him. Then let me say it differently. His voice was steady, certain. I'm not going anywhere. Even if the world tells me to. Even if it's hard. Even if you push me away to test if I'll leave. I'm staying. She finally looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You don't know that, she said, her voice breaking. You don't know what it's like when it gets hard. You're right, he said. I don't, but I'm willing to find out. With you. Judge Williams watched them carefully. Amara, she said gently, what do you need? Amara took a shaky breath. I don't need someone to save me, she said. So quietly the court reporter had to lean forward to hear. I need someone who won't leave. The words hung in the air. The same words she'd written in her letter. The same truth she'd carried like a weight. Elias's voice was steady when he answered. Then I'll stay. Judge Williams let the silence breathe for a moment. Then she spoke. I presided over hundreds of adoption cases. I've seen families formed and families broken. And what I've learned is this. Love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. She looked at Jennifer Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell, your complaint has been noted and investigated. I find no evidence of behavioral issues that would prevent placement. What I find is a child who's learned to protect herself. Then she turned to Elias. Mr. Monroe, this won't be easy. There will be days when you question yourself. Days when Amara questions you. But if you mean what you've said here today, if you're truly prepared to stay, then I'm prepared to grant provisional placement. Elias felt the ground shift beneath him. Provisional? Patricia asked. 6 months of supervised placement. The judge clarified, with regular check-ins. At the end of that period, we'll reconvene and determine if permanent adoption is appropriate. She looked at Amara. Does that sound okay to you? Amara looked at Elias. Really looked at him, searching for cracks, for exits for the lie. She didn't find one. Okay, she whispered. Judge Williams brought down her gavel. Provisional placement granted. The townhouse was in Brooklyn, Park Slope, on a tree-lined street where the brownstones leaned toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. Elias had bought it 6 months earlier, back when adoption was just an idea, a possibility, a way to fill the hollow space Naomi had left behind. He'd hired contractors immediately, told them exactly what he needed, and watched as they transformed the space into something he'd never quite believed would be used. Until now. The moving van had left an hour ago. Amara's belongings, what little she had, were already inside. A few boxes of clothes. Her art supplies. The turtle plush she'd had since Baltimore. The drawings she made over the past 3 months, including the one of the 2 stick figures under a crooked sun. Now it was just the 2 of them, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the red brick facade. Ready? Elias asked. Amara nodded, but her hands were gripping the armrest of her wheelchair, so tightly her knuckles had gone white. He unlocked the front door and held it open. After you. She wheeled herself up the ramp, smooth, gentle, perfectly graded, and into the foyer, and stopped. The first thing she noticed was the light. Not harsh fluorescent buzzing, but soft, natural light streaming through tall windows. The second thing was a space. Wide hallways, open doorways, nothing cluttered or cramped or institutional. The third thing was the height of everything. The coat hooks were lower. The light switches were within reach. The mirror in the entryway wasn't mounted 6 feet up the wall. It was positioned so someone in a wheelchair could actually see themselves. Elias, her voice was small. Yeah. Why is everything? She trailed off. wheeling slowly down the hallway, her eyes scanning every detail. Why is everything the right height? Because I built it for you. She stopped at the kitchen entrance. The counters were lowered. The cabinets had pulled-down shelves. The sink was accessible from a seated position. There was a rolling island she could move wherever she needed it. I don't understand, she whispered. What don't you understand? People don't do this. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide and wet. People don't change their whole house before they even know if it's going to work. Elias crouched down beside her wheelchair. I knew it was going to work, he said quietly. From the first day, even when you told me not to choose you, even when you said you'd break me, I knew. Amara's lip trembled. But what if the judge said no? What if I couldn't come here? You would have built all this for nothing. It wouldn't have been for nothing, Elias said, because I would have kept trying. And when it finally worked, you'd have a home waiting for you. She stared at him, something cracking open in her chest. Can I see my room? She asked, her voice barely audible. Of course. He led her down the hallway to the last door on the left. She reached for the handle, then hesitated. What if I don't like it? Then we'll change it. Elias said, it's your room, your space, however you want it. She took a breath and pushed the door open. The first thing she saw was the color. Sky blue, not baby blue or pastel blue, but the deep, rich blue of a summer afternoon, the kind of sky you could get lost in. The second thing was the bed, low to the ground, easy to transfer to, with a canopy of sheer white curtains that made it feel like sleeping on a cloud. The third thing was the mural. It covered the entire wall opposite the bed, a turtle larger than life, with a shell painted in swirling galaxies, deep purples and blues, silver stars, whole constellations mapped across its back. And instead of legs, the turtle had wheels, galaxy wheels, just like her wheelchair. Amara wheeled herself closer, her hand reaching out to touch the painted stars. This, her voice broke. This looks like someone built it for me. Someone did, Elias said softly. She turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face now, no longer trying to hold them back. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this? Because you deserve it, he said simply. Because you're not too much or too broken or too hard to love. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. And this, he gestured around the room. This is what home looks like when someone builds it for you instead of asking you to fit into theirs. Amara covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd allowed herself in the courtroom. Not the careful, measured crying she'd learned to do silently, so no one would call her difficult. These were the tears of a child who'd finally been given permission to believe. Elias knelt beside her and waited. When she finally lowered her hands, her face was blotchy and wet and more open than he'd ever seen it. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That I'll wake up and this will be gone. That you'll change your mind. That I'll do something wrong and you'll realize you made a mistake. You won't, Elias said. But even if you did, even if you tested every boundary and pushed every button and made things as hard as possible, I'd still be here. How do you know? Because I made a promise, he said. Not to the judge, not to the social workers, to you. And I keep my promises now. She studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, she reached out and took his hand. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll try to believe you. That's all I'm asking. Later that afternoon, after Amara had explored every corner of her new room and traced her fingers over every painted star, Elias found her in the kitchen, staring out at the backyard. What are you looking at? He asked. There's a garden, she said. Yeah, I thought maybe we could plant some things. If you want. She turned to him. Can we plant something for your sister? Elias felt his throat tighten. You want to do that? She's a reason you found me, Amara said simply. We should remember her. They went to a nursery in Prospect Heights and picked out a magnolia sapling, Naomi's favorite tree. The woman at the register helped them load it into the trunk of Elias's car, and they drove home in comfortable silence. In the backyard, they found a spot near the fence where the afternoon sun pooled warm and golden. Elias dug the hole. Amara held the sapling steady while he filled the earth back and around the roots. They watered together, Amara holding the hose while Elias guided the stream. When they finished, they sat there for a while. Elias on the ground, Amara in her wheelchair beside him, looking at the small tree that would one day grow tall and strong and full of blossoms. Do you think she knows? Amara asked quietly. Knows what? That you kept your promise. That you stayed. Elias looked at the tree, then at the girl beside him. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. I think she knows. Amara reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm glad you found me, she whispered. Me too. In a world obsessed with saving, this story isn't about rescue. It's not about a billionaire swooping in to save a poor disabled child. It's not about charity or pity or grand gestures that look good in headlines. It's about something quieter, something harder. It's about staying, when staying is the hardest thing of all. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the person you're showing up for pushes you away because they're so certain you'll leave that they'd rather control the narrative themselves. It's about building a home not just with walls and accessible counters, but with presence, with consistency, with the kind of love that doesn't demand affection or gratitude or even immediate trust. It's about learning that sometimes the people who need us most are the ones teaching us what we need. Elias didn't save Amara. They saved each other. So here's the question. What would you have done in Elias's place? When faced with a child who'd already been abandoned 3 times, who warned you away, who built walls, who tested every promise you made, would you have stayed? Do you believe some people are meant to find each other? That the universe conspires to bring broken pieces together so they can build something whole? Or do you think it's simpler than that? That love is just a choice you make every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if the story touched you, if it made you feel something true and deep and lasting, hit that subscribe button, because this is what we do here. We tell stories that stay with you long after they end. Stories about real people facing real struggles and finding real hope. If you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear our next tale. One about a woman who lost everything and found again in the last place she thought to look. Subscribe now. Don't miss it, because some stories are too important to scroll past, and some promises are too sacred to break.